Thank you very much, Chiku, and thank you to Mr. Fuller and to the Offen Fund and the Committee on Creative Writing. This is a really big honor, and I'm really excited. And thank you also to the Committee on Social Thought for allowing me the space to maintain this other way of thinking, even as I'm putatively thinking about other things. So I'll start with this poem about a self that has mostly receded at this point, thankfully. Big hair. Big hair. Too pansy among the galvanized, too monkey-faced and smelling of clean old ladies and dirty old men, too skittish house cat, house coat, too given to sunlit panic at it. Piggy bigness stares bigly at every turn. Heartworm and hurt womb. I take my lunch in the presence of abstract sculpture, which lends an air of absurdity to the whole proceedings. The vague suggestion of a penis, the flying red fish to nowhere. Tiny yellow leaves drifting from dark branches are hallucinations. Beautiful. Last night, you told me the smog had settled in. That is my fault. All around, professionals seem not to mind, refulgent in their various states of tailor and repose. Considering options, anxiety and or shoplift knee socks, big hair, and clearly dirty. Handbell among the brass band, and jealous. Okay. I forgot my water, so I'm gonna get it before I go anywhere. This next poem is about a trip. Betrothal. I disembarked. Too long before, I'd lived on a boat beside a distant shore, eating fried smelt, dancing fireside on the beach beneath every full moon, but this time, from the moment I'd found sea legs, I scanned the horizon for unknown birds, winding the word land around my fingers like a piece of twine until the morning I opened my eyes to hear it shouted from the crow's nest. I gathered my things, secured the strap of my broad-brimmed hat, its scarlet feather bobbing. Did I feel the creaking sway of the ramp or the rope's jute weight under my palm? The scent of sunlight cracking the salt air was once removed. Blue glass behind. Everything melted together in the bustle of port, alive all at once, hooks and pots and bare arms melting together, textiles woven with patterns recalling nothing. A fat, pensive man in a sweat-stained shirt, smoking, skinny yellow dog with the mange, some inscrutable melons, ageless woman standing laughing so as to show where teeth were missing, ice cream, hair cream, undershirts for sale, and sex, the body of a child jerked back when her mother pulled her hair, and the eyes of her mother, and the staring eyes of a fish as its head was cleaved from its mercury body, all drowning in the opaque traffic of foreign weights and measures, the thick, sour cadence of their bubbling tongue, until I saw only blood and ochre, smoke and bleached bone color. I saw and then stopped short. You touched my elbow. I fathomed our journey over land. And this little triptych is also about being on a trip. A Baedeker. Manhattan. Founded in 1624 by Dutch traders, Manhattan is not amused. If you're not Manhattan, why bother? Why bother showing up at all if you're not going to tie me to the bed? I kid. The straps are in the top drawer of the bedside table under the fall design issue of the Times magazine. It is perhaps best known for professional blowouts and for its namesake hand-shaken cocks. The salons and saloons are famous for them, justifiably, Manhattan will tell you, over a glass of American rye and bitters, cherry imported from deepest Washington state. In 1902, Manhattan was devoured by locusts. A century later, it groans under the weight of 1,600,000 unsolicited manuscripts and one naked cowboy fighting valiantly for seared corneas in the new Times Square. If you're not already Manhattan, Manhattan may beckon you at intervals, and you may return to run your hand along its reptilian spine and remember what you're already not. Los Angeles. Lottie, 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 Los Angeles turns around to see who just walked in. It's some Franciscan friars and drunk-faced McCord. Los Angeles nods, returns to its cucumber handroll. Lightly Los Angeles wears gold, as Wynn and Cibola and glisten on brown, as leg hair, as expertly highlighted head hair, parachute, spandex, and halo and sand. Hang on one sec, LA has a call. Please bring Chick-fil-A from the South Bay Mall. Thanks, babe, you're the best, kiss, kiss. Its primary industry is art. Its signature art is smooth surface, ball bearings over concrete and hand over bedsheet, cover over labor and rubber over ridge, and syruping traffic over tarmac pancake, pith and saline subtly under skin smelling faintly of felony and melon. Chicago. Algonquin for nodding onion, Chicago plods. Plodding, onion growing, chocolate smelling over certain bridges, Chicago is a city of manageable bridges and modest icons, given quietly to steady self-promotion, waxing hopefully its holy green lines and faint, embarrassing mustache, humming tunelessly its heavy bricks and murders. Where once was Indian war and untreated sewage, today one makes a decent living tasting, another lives licking lovingly the metal of machine, or by wrenching, or perhaps in being wrenched, or in being wrench, maybe tightening the nuts, maybe following a rusty arc in flight from here towards the works as Chicago sings joylessly its underbreath epic, meat and cold wind. The chorus, most American. Okay, this next poem is the newest one here, still old, but it's about the uncanny. A few years ago in class, one of my dissertation advisors wanted to maintain that flying in an airplane is not uncanny, but I think we convinced him otherwise. Utopic. I said the title of the poem is Grenadine. Rain is neither the object nor subject of raining. It rains. My low hum is one with the hum of the airplane bathroom. There is no inside. Even counting implies a rhetorical project. People smoking 15 feet from the door. Bumper stickers on that Buick, buds on this tree, nodules blossoming at odd intervals along my finger bones, 1 and 2 and 3. Remembering is triple vision. He said the eye of the partridge is coeval with time. Oh, eternal partridge, I think, I said, and entitled it Aspiration. Against a bus stop shelter, a boy holds a girl's face in both hands, kissing. I can't tell if it's hard or soft. It rains. The poem is called Sophrosony. Oh, eternal, I say. I hold myself in my left hand like a paperweight, worry it like a sore in my mouth, gathering, emerging, opening against my tongue. Presumably, the world remains in place. Okay. This poem was an act of violence. Dream Thief. He dreamed he threw her green hat in the garbage, the hat he had bought for himself and then given her because she needed a hat. In another dream, he dallied on the edge of faithlessness, sitting wrapped on some concrete steps, about to say, I can't, when he awakes, their cat sneezing into his face, into the sleep-tangled copper wire of her hair, in the sun, on the pink pillowcase. She has been dreaming the Golden Gate Bridge, suspended in pieces by silver zeppelins over an Olympic stadium. All of his teeth have fallen out, and nothing will be the same. A mountain, a bassoon, a chrysalis appear in succession, yet they are no closer to understanding why the eggs turn out hard or runny, but seldom soft-boiled. They love soft-boiled eggs. After breakfast, stumbling towards parody, he washes the plates, she rinses the spoons and glasses. There is no basis for complaint. A diamond appears, and an eggplant, mute as an eggplant. Their morning is a gray ball of pet hair, their afternoon a nightmare of missed trains and disappointing puppets. They arrive home as the sky breaks open, just enough for the yolk to bleed out, just enough to insult them through the dining room window. As the light falls over the classifieds on the table, she sings in the shower. He wonders about the formal structure of promise. Soon the radio will play pasteurized jazz. Soon, lackadaisical and nightgowned, she will pull strands of copper from a boar-bristle bust as he reads from the Nation in a pitched, complaining tenor. At 1:30 in the morning, he will wake her. They will love each other like the sound of a harpsichord or the taste of tepid rose tea, but not like a textbook in accounting. They live by the tracks, and through the night, they can hear the trains. She will lay her head down on the cold stone. He will wax the bright blade of a guillotine, and still they are. And these next poems are also about violence. 2 mirrors of 3. 1. Speculum. No transfers, no suffrage either, for my poor being under roiling, this street-clean, soul-watering, this merciless frescoed, and you, under this self-same stretched out on the ethical plane, strong muscles, 1, 2, in rational tandem, bringing up the axe and heaving through. Oh dear, here is all clubs and scalpels, all plain crashes for fun and profit. See, here the difference. I've seen a man possessed by unclean spirits. I've had that experience myself, seen being with legs in stirrups. Oh, this. I'm just holding it for someone, seeing only every shade of red. Three, flat screen. I don't live there. Still, I must admit, Ukraine's got talent. Weak sauce, you cry to that, I say. Imagine bacon in it. Tastiest death knell I've ever heard is facile apposition, a lesson in coxcomb and self-immolation, in home decor and cubicle war. Pride goeth before. I blanch at the luxury of my complaint. I grab my membership tote and drive to the gym. I could never stay here if not for so many soft places to pass out. Spore. The 11th hour is upon us. Strawberries in the restaurant display case. We speak to one another. We assemble cheap plastic, pushing our piles across the table and into the other's lap. Find a place for that. This place smiles nervously. Its squat white cups are too full. We are speaking. I imagine the life cycle of a spore. If my eyes are wandering to the refrigerated display case, you must find it in your heart to forgive me. I too am suspended. I am suspended above this restaurant table, the novice swimmer who did not expect the deep end. There are bodies and there are bleeding bodies. Where there is no blood, there is bunting. Bunting there is, and the non-equivalence of equivalence. I will not be surprised. Find a place for that. Find for me instead a damp place to rest. Okay, I was not going to read this poem because it is obscene, but then I read Woodland Bop in Bill Fuller's book, and it had a reference to the parsing of different kinds of fruit, and I could not help myself, so apologies for the sensitive. Obscenities. Biting into lemon, shard of shrapnel in the tongue, senseless clench, all seedy, worry is blackberry, fragile and hairy, saccharine less than, at once forgiven, and blueberry in pie, and then voluptuous onus, but sullen, and oh, girth and glee, toothsome shame of supermarket strawberry, no clean steak left in apple, but mango is tied pool and ermine, and melon is drowned face down in 2 inches of silt and sunset, one sodden lung, the other lung golden, papaya, the tender, the tongue, and some oranges are oranges, but others are a loving fuck. Okay, and this last poem think I'm okay time-wise? This is okay. This last poem is a Valentine's Day dedication. French. Hier soir. There's an amateurish watercolor skyline above this patio cafe. The eggs want salt. There's dirt in my salade, and in my mouth I feel you as an absence. That is, as form and space at once, an object of curiosity, now in my mouth, now sitting there across the table from me. Curious how my tongue can press against nothing, how nothing echoes the phrase, French food is overrated, in this old town plaza like all the rest, lousy with tourists and so much good light against peach, vanilla, butter, apricot, with shutters all the same, dull blue. Blue as the veins where my skin lets the light through to expose irregular highways, the road map to my advancing age. The sky-colored line traversing my right breast, you do not mind. You say you'll stick around as time drags it, ever bluer, towards Earth's center. J'espère, mon amour. L'amour, l'amour. Careful to exaggerate, or it sounds like death. Can I say I speak that language if I don't know the word for thirst? I know to drink again, too much. I know some red things are lost to me now, pleasures real and red, lost as a potted rose you bought for me in Nice and then left in the teeming swelter of the station at Toulon for another woman to carry home. I know I must pay and move on along, maybe go eat an ironic sundae with chantilly cream and blackcurrant sorbet, or buy some sleeping pills and a pregnancy test, or go down to the blank beach, feel form and space in salt water, or ride it over and over and over and over and over again in the silver sand. So much do I, or even sin outright and say it to you here.
I'm a little disorganized today. I apologize. Part of being in a position of trust is occasionally one encounters lawsuits. Common law, after all, is a collection of all the lawsuits, and so I've been involved as the corporate representative in one in the Daily Center now for about 5 weeks, which basically means I get to do my regular job about 1 hour in the morning. So this is quite a confusing day. But I want to thank Anne, if she's around, for arranging this. It's a terrific crowd. I'm kind of amazed. And I'm grateful to Dawn for such a beautiful reading, and John for his wonderful introduction. I was asked to maybe talk about why I chose Dawn's work, and I think you probably understand without my having to say anything. Basically, you had me at the word Manhattan, as I recall, with the 1,000,006 unsolicited manuscripts. That said, I was really impressed with all of the entries into the competition. I've never judged the competition. This is probably my last time I'll do it. And I do think that there was just such a range of different approaches and talents that I felt I ought to give something back, seeing as people were kind enough to allow me to read their work. So I took a few phrases from some of the poems, and I do apologize if your sort of heartfelt, bleeding work is wrenched out of context. I have no context, so I view that as simply a condition of life. So, but I hope that this little collage that I prepared will be meaningful for all of you, or at least some of you. My pitchy eye agog, I specifically asked you not to cheat on me or vomit blazing balls of gas from Thebes to Galilee. We all know what you did with the old light bulbs. Keep your hands off my buttocks. I was not meant to be the mermaid's lute and punched at my pillows until they bled, though doctor cautioned between two lungs, a pensive man like a Carolingian king plunges through a whoop of foliage. Doorknobs crooning to your dictionary mounted the trenches of my bed and wielding Occam's razor chopped my legs to pieces. Diatomaceous idiots, empty as Herod's gaze, grooved like leaf blades in all the fleshy folds of H.P. Lovecraft. I changed the groove to a verb there, by the way, just sort of a generational thing. When evening light is shed, the International Monetary Fund reeks of too much mugwort, and blue napkins on a stranger's body grow stump-like in the children's choir. The matador we call the sky wouldst prowl the squalor hall with xylophone gargling clumps of time. Delusian women, delousing me in the moon's soak. Numbing squeegee, undusk my dreams. Bullied sonnets in the annals of Henry James, planetary potluck pea soup freak, fronds down, eat your fill. I brandish turnip slices and staple myself to the sky, but I cannot smell myself. It's like Hamlet, I guess, right? Then a word like autumnal peered down my nose and into my skin, exposing secrets. You undressed for gumbo, this much I know. Dancing in the streets of inert thousands, shimmering. And now the funny poems. I'm going to read, I think, exclusively from a manuscript being published by Flood Editions sometime later this year called Playtime. And I may read something more recent as well. Announcement. There was an announcement made recently using words like translucent and infinite and intemerate, but we missed it at the time and had to look it up afterwards. By then, the changes had taken place, and everything that wasn't strange before had now become strange, and everything that was already strange had become even stranger. A few predictable protests ensued, and as usual, they missed the point. Someone asked why it is thus and not otherwise, which put an end to speculation. Both evasive and blunt, the announcement seemed to be the work of many hands. One could almost say that each word was contributed by a different person, a group of persons, and that the words not only reflected dissimilarities of thought and approach, but embodied each contributor's most urgent personal priority. During the following weeks, people would gather to talk, seemingly on unrelated matters. It was as if they too had missed the announcement or had forgotten it. The day I sat down to write this, sleet was bouncing off the roof. We watched as it fell. A large dog came out from behind a tree and started to growl. No one knew how the dog got there, yet all felt its appearance had to be explained. Next morning, the streets were clear and sheep grazed on the sidewalks. I was sailing a ship made of snow. The parks. At the eternal prospect eyed closely, we close our eyes and lift a city block high in the air with nothing falling off, then set it back down to oceanic noise as amber fluid leaks back from yesterday and to shapeless gather round like constellated litter. The sun presents itself as gracious agent of anomalous illumination or figure transcribed from dark sources regulating the east, in whose light nothing is lost save incriminating memoranda, which leave word where to find them, should dispossession bury all and they prove useful, although at that point, who would know? If you accept this, you've agreed to be governed by the kind of reasoning that asks you simply to sit still for a minute and peer into the sand-colored vagueness, foregoing its appraisal in any but proprietary terms, which climb perpendicular to the imperium, spreading over the backs of those whose devotion to its arched aura grows deeper and deeper from continuous recital of facts forced out of their sockets by the gleam or glimmer of spots unknown. Our parks are full of them. Better keep track. Hampton. I lay in a field in eastern Connecticut, surrounded by my long-dead ancestors, who had arrived there from Salem Village at the end of the 17th century. Each full moon, we would lean back on elbows and attempt to converse. Over time, something like friendship arose among us, even though it would not be an exaggeration to say that during our most lucid nights, we only understood every 10th word that was spoken. From these words, however, we were able to prepare sentence-like statements whose significance we would painstakingly try to convey, although these explanations contained large gaps, making them more impenetrable than what they were meant to explain. As years passed, it grew apparent that fewer and fewer words were being understood, so that a full night's discourse of 10,000 utterances might be distilled into, quote, love's lowest souls are goats, or seas, woods, trees. Sometimes the long night would yield exactly one intelligible word. Other times, despite surges of vocal sound, not a single distinct syllable could be deciphered, either by hearer or speaker. Rather than discourage us, these baffling exchanges drew us more warmly together under the bright moon in the twisted vegetation. So much so that one spring night we succeeded in piecing together, God knows how, the phrase subdimensional projection, which was then followed by years of silence. 12 nights ago, that silence was finally broken as the moon rose in its circuit course and backward course, and four of us spontaneously announced, nothing is future in reference to now. Nottingham Town. The most extraordinary animal approached, holding out enormous hands, then late last night became extinct, vanishing through the mirror of all that moves, while earth slept and honey and figs were unperceived, or were split open for dreaming, and an unborn widow weighed the logically possible but unlikely event that her emulated brain would one day comprise all 10 perfections. Shot through with shining splendors, traveling at incredible speed toward a pair of naked feet in a river, binding all that fluctuates to a little flesh made cunningly, its transpontine calm a shiver, and without access to tools that would expose the leaking heart. I may not live to reach a truth whose drift I find discouraging. This hat, for example, was the last one he wore, and now he's cleaning the buttery floor in a pure flame of early sun, billowing out like a cloud in which an image is drawn, or out of which things cohere, waves of people not looking up. Then one day there's no atmosphere, only white ink and residuum of trees, or something else inconceivably complicated, not as transparent reduction near the end of a great pier stretching into space, space that can be decanted into other space if its rigidity won't moderate. What happened last should have happened first. What happened first should have happened last. But what is venerable happens first and last. Far away, evening is educed. It resembles a huge drum or substrate of inaccordant mixtures, or a ponderous door beneath a distant roof of frozen stone. Its center, undiminished in a pool of stars, was clad, bringing into being what is skilled by premonition of exercising powers. There is nothing in this glass, although I can taste it. Out of 10 utterances, not one is true. The Vole. We made a wide right turn onto the road, breathing loudly, although not at the macrocosmic level. We were preoccupied with a certain claim asserted by vegetable life and by a sign. Never occurred to us to be more circumspect, less officious, or that we were highly fortunate to be able to speak our minds at the exact moment their contents became organized enough to be spoken. We might have known, as indeed we do now, that these contents were so relentlessly and excessively detailed that to articulate them to any but the most sympathetic audience would be a serious mistake, one which could cost us years of concentrated effort to win back our authority. Nonetheless, we possessed shape and motion and propelled ourselves forward day after day until our momentum was finally persuaded to associate itself with more restrained impulses tending to rest. And in this state, with its extra features, we came to know thoughtless things and learn how to unthink them in exchange for payment. The electric garden. I grow tired of trying to understand why they think that way, or even if what they are doing should be called thinking, given that it concludes in a low buzzing sound interspersed with clicks. This is all autobiographical, by the way. I decide to ignore them in favor of the electric garden. The waterfall is bright blue, the rocks are dark yellow, the shrubs are black and white. You are standing in the midst of these, and you look happy, although your size is out of proportion to everything else. So I'm beginning to think you might be a statue. Overhead, the planets creep in close and stream their influences. This causes the garden to pitch back and forth as each influence takes its turn prevailing. The sky cuts the unhinged air into unequal parts, anointing my opportunity to withdraw. And while I'd like to know if that's really appropriate here, depending on whether duties are altered, and also on what role bifurcation might play, there's no time. Saturn is pouring down. Witchcraft. After being possessed and overcome by the devil, I lost access to my own thoughts. This meant that in order to recover them, I had to ask question after question of strangers, which for the most part they couldn't answer. When someone felt he or she could answer, I took careful note of what was said and how it was said and made a point to request an account of its origin and development. In this way, over many months and years, I was slowly able to regain access to my mental life, even translating into propositions for public or private use. But problems soon arose when my intentions proved too elusive for my means to convey them, which resulted in unexpected deflections and distortions and turned my ideas into twigs. Despite this, I have something to tell you. What for so long you and I have observed together day in and day out has been constantly modified by what we don't see, leaving one whole side of experience blank. And now that we've grown old, we lack energy to work out what these dark lanes or vacant areas impart to us. Although the intellect takes pleasure in exercising itself according to the fivefold method, listening, reading, grasping, remembering, forgetting, there are some tasks that make it bristle. I hereby represent myself to you as the residue of things that aren't true. Or can these even be distinguished? Whose face shades the difference? Whose memory stores it? I'll figure out how to do this. Poem called Nothing to Adjust. It's one of the, I think it's the only poem I'm aware of that takes its starting point as the Uniform Principal and Income Act. Yeah, that's right. The power to adjust, Section 104, the model statute. What do you do if there's nothing to adjust? The speech of animals is necessity without shape, a plane bouncing out of the indifferent to see, the object of itself being prepared like nothing before it, seductively clinging to the frayed bunch thought bears and makes no regression from privations, but takes the time to rejoice if stabilized like small rocks in tea. It is the shed illusion perpetuates the pile of candor, unbridled words more or less envenomate, it meaning what restrains alienation, in error implausibly farcical, that is, in effect, a chance or effect of chance, whose ludic wings orbit a thick mass that the sprout knows not. Let the hair and so forth be permeated by spirits and their advisors. Are there sufficient remote contingencies to align them properly? Organs of speech stroll past without disparaging anyone. Read somewhere, tin tongues prolong wickedness. Memo to file, bottles clank. Courtesy of unfailing sensitive faculty, ground of eternal boilerplate, buzzing by mistake. Depart, organic drivers, don't applaud who blot their own wherewithal. Untested is their prophetic strength. I too, towards whom I was not hostile, turned hostile towards me. The forest itself and the goats of Choate, now orthogonal, like every other phrase, managed to smile. Streaming from nearby Nineveh, they flew backwards into the path of a moth. Another way to say this, the court denies relief, which is not something withdrawn, a hill or hillock disappearing. The present is prelusive delusion, each footstep more discreet, until none. Or do I get to that question? By your own terms, weren't you an infant spitting up what's not? No proposition is anyone's, therefore unaware 10,000 different plastic tubes resonate or not at all. In the 12th degree of Taurus, on the finger of the heart, incurious Caucasus went berserk, dog walking by. People were afraid you meant the opposite, nerves out, muscles in, longing to twitch. They also seek who only sleep, status stunted, whoever you are. Think of the big sky, plus one on tiptoe, wailing lightward. On May 1st, wildflowers turned left into the sun. Unbeknownst, fallen to pieces, the gnats of Nostradamus, stuffed with cheese, whither they vanish is not. Pause. 1 year later, sweat adorns most excellent pronoun. Why boast low clouds a spreading Zeno said, go, little precepts, enjoy your unknown language. My notes suggest no reaction, moist portraits talking at nightfall, river of night, river of unpaid bills. Suppose one begins to dissolve those horrible powers, tape their mouths shut, sua sponte. No cause, they say. Trees leak while the mighty imagination strains for air. There's something else, some new proprietor laughing and peeling off trifles to hang numbers on, parsing inlets and coves with skewed tweezers in threefold diaphanous silence. Meanwhile, wood, stones, fire, flesh sustain the god with two heads staring down. The horses of night, their jangling hooves, nominally in line as echoes or self-continuance of sound in the air, a concept burrowing through archives, unchallenged, oblique, infected, erected from efflux of quincunx at Delphi, where a door is opened by zealots, a shining heap of coarse energy, also of gold. Stand back against the sky's shamefaced who never was. Think you what being is. Stand back that other one emerge on the 14th day from fresh voids, spun in pores, not well, but ill, like properties associated with existence, chopped up by a driveling stream. Next quarter's dissimilarity to last might loop in a planet as it waits for a train, asking why there's no priestess, but rather, who's that? Who's that, head bowed toward the flicker of sequacious reasoning, or pool of human capital used to compute suspicious amazement? In the world below, mass solitude drags watery pen through butter, which doesn't sound odd to speculative types. A little diffused, C-section C, next stop, Porlock. Startling inference from horoscope on surface of bread seems reasonable to me. Slow fading spell of time, not a bone, but a vapor. Two last poems, both of which have the word molecule in them, which I just noticed. Future interests. The molecules turned tenderly toward me while a fist gathered speed. The dark sky's core glowed. Its radiance was less than a boundless or immeasurable radiance, but more than a practical, literary, or mechanical radiance. The unshaped stars exceeded all refinement, passing from peak to peak inside a sphere whose center was nowhere. The trees chanted elegant lightning through the wet leaves of outer space. The glorious morning lay dead asleep, and the thought of waking it likewise slept. Our then living descendants had not yet been born. Making sure I got that one right. This last piece is I've been working on. I normally overwork these things before I read them. This is not the case in this case, but I just thought I'd see what it sounded like. As I say, I didn't even have a title for it. I've given it a working title of Plinth, spelled with a Y, as on the first Faces album. And there is a reference actually to a Small Faces song in here, and also to the Bonzo Dog Band. So, Mr. John, just so. This has nothing to do with the current court proceeding that I'm attending. In your place, it's called Plinth for now. In your place, I propose a tower of snow or crisscrossing ruts viewed vertically with no apex or uniform approach to joining their opposed principles. The correct thing to apply in each case avoids being seen, and the map remains obscure despite the clarifying imposition of conventions. Not metaphors for agency, these elastic spawn were soaked in vinegar prior to the 19th century, well before the rule of law came to an end, and parties could seek relief simply by running their mouths backward. There was nothing then but landlocked time looking up from the sky from this exact spot, whereas now basis bends before the storm. A delicate framework might be ripped apart to let in light, but to see what? An arrogant, volitionless agent on whose behalf? Or it turns out these are not clouds, nor does the sky present itself to the viewer with any purpose in mind than to be taken as objective. It floats along the valves of the storm to the nebulous antipodes of an argument, the wrong place willingly substituted or made less significant for having been wound in a spool of words. Meanwhile, she said the light was green, and while it was true that she said it, what she said wasn't true. The whole idea is to whisper yourself into activity and make no exception for your state of mind. Light once was dark, and nothing was sustained by it. No pulse, no gesture, no performance relative to peers, only huge depth tasting of ashes with a smooth finish suggesting landscapes devoid of any compelling features, pinpoints divested of pins. There, doors were windows, windows were doors, time was reversible, and people remained seated to achieve the goals of inanimate things, while inanimate things made music despite their silence, and what could be born at what cost sought companionship and underwriting that cost on the 23rd floor of the 23rd Psalm in a conundrum piled high like dirty snow with rock-like intensity staring down at the ground or foundation of the ground. This last point should be outlined in phosphor. The dance section begins now. Is that your testimony? Which lies are labyrinths? What wandering flesh, whose gleaming representations through frayed showbread ecstatically are to be gleaned? You picked up a pencil and bit off part of the sky. The sidewalk vanished into the storm. A lamp burned inside the brain to reveal the workings of an intelligence skilled at drawing stray material signs into its passageways. Remote from knowledge, your impressions woke slowly to cancel the ambrosia, and in 10 minutes your arms were numb and the tent you slept in destroyed by the wind. Is it even relevant you were ostracized? One more day of this, perhaps, one or two highly specific remarks, one or two hard feelings, nothing left unsaid, flowers in the snow. In fact, the dawn knelt before you every day you continued to exist, correct? The angle of your vision was impaired by no objects. The walls wove themselves into you. But was something dislodged by the storm and so unable to maintain its independence without applying to authorized parties for support? In due course, did they take up the application? Clouds sowed rain in the faces of speakers and the faces of readers reading the change of the poem tracks across an icy sky. From the perimeter you see everyone. None sees you. Your pulse pounds out an electric appetite for interruption and delay. The manner of your transcription betokens a regrettable convergence of molecules that had sought a different destiny. For truth is like a snowflake in all but uniqueness. And disquiet will not admit to basic elations or assert that analysis really is interminable. It's hard to tell the difference when they take their hats off is an excuse not quite present to the ear or born of the chattering landfill of the mighty Dharma king who rescinds himself note by note, passing over the switches that regulate his meaning. May your hands be changed into snakes. Out of respect for automatic voices, I now reverse myself. Was that a different you just then swinging past me? Your first words were like animals, although that impression was modified by their successors who, by keeping their feet off the railing, so to speak, showed some consideration for those seated below. Next morning, 6 bright spirits rebuilt the courthouse larger than before. After this, the sun failed to rise for 6 days, and yet the air still sparkled in its absence. Or did the spirits space themselves at lucid intervals to link together all these reticent, deceptive, and evasive souls? How much uncertainty could there actually be in a person's voice after the incredible pains taken to put the picture together, methodically coating its entire surface with a lack of ambiguity? But the unconscious monkeys around with the word reasonable. We're now in the 6th generation of snow people, and there's no sign that any of them wishes to be a martyr for new modes of being. You shake your hands to shake out the cold or trace the outlines they throw in successive images extracted from a sidelong look. A woman fiercely rotates her arms. Barely awake, a man questions his hawk, his horse, and his dog. She was here, after all, let the record show, then fled through the broom. Which of you is neediest, or whose face most calmly shades fear? The window melts fire in the fading light. Someone you trusted may have been, and in fact was, derelict as to what we've just been talking about. Is that a moose? Upstairs, thoughts put on their clothes. We're not clear whether this may have already happened, although everything hinges on sending memory down forking paths while continuity races ahead to prepare for it. Tell me, have you ever seen me? I need you there in order to exist. The figure, absorbed in secondary qualities, doesn't know, doesn't answer, pivots in the snow, retreats, covers itself with the veil of the horizon. The modest mind lies still. Think about the map again, how it looked in the mirror, how the destinations lined up though the values were wrong. Later, we released its artisanal twin, save for one small flaw that flared along a golden ring and petered out in silence. Whether this was evidence wasn't disputed because unknown. The peaks of sky fold in, inducing a kind of exploratory or lassitudinous wandering. In the deep cold, the threat to mash you down like butter against the sun impresses. Your reluctance roasts slowly. Look back into the past and see what else you can distinguish. This is the final demonstrative. It writes itself on the wing of what you know, but you are not what it means when it mentions you, nor are you other than that. fluted indifferently into decaying sound to arrive or not, where you are or were, present when absent. Was this the standard you applied? When the cold fled, those responsible for it soon found other things to do, but memory kept raising up weird shapes, and hypothetical phrases laid them down. Thank you.